to others or to yourself, will it be enough? And in Psalms 119 and 120, verse 129, I'm going to read that real quick. It says, "Thy testimonies are wonderful, therefore doth my soul keep them." And, you know, I thought, man, I could just end it right there, because our testimonies are wonderful. And, you know, I used to go to the church in Sparta, Brother Edmondson's church, and I'm telling you what, them women, they would get up and they would start testifying about what God has done. And it was nothing to complain about, nothing, whatever happens, but they would get up and just thank God for what He's done. And when they first get up, they would say, "Praise the Lord, saints." And they would keep saying that until everybody in the church said, "Praise the Lord, saints," back. Because they wanted to know that God's real. And their testimonies, every time I heard them, oh man, it would touch me. Because it seemed like sometimes you're going through things. And a testimony, when you get up to testify, it is something you've been through and you're going through right now. And you're like, "God, where's the answer?" And sometimes it's just in a testimony. Sometimes it's not in the preaching. Sometimes it's not in somebody coming up and laying hands on you. Sometimes it's just in a small testimony.
That's right.
And, you know, there was a few things that my family's been going through, and Brother Shannon got up the other night, and it was a short message, but I'm telling you what, it touched where it needed. I mean, it was just so overwhelming, and I was like, wow, you know, it's amazing. You don't realize just that, thinking, well, that was just a short thing, but it really did. I mean, it just went to the heart, because I thought, man, I wish I would have had that recorded, but I forgot the recorder. I thought, man, I wish I had that recorded, because that just touched me. And a few things that, you know, that people minister, and Brother Kenny back there has just been, you know, when he tells you stuff, it really just penetrates on your mind. You're thinking, wow, you go home and you start thinking about it. And there's so many things that if you listen, that could be your testimony. And somebody could be just saying something that would bless your heart. And as I was saying, I was like, God, I'm not for sure what you're wanting with this, but I have so much to testify about. I have so much that God has done through my life. And I was going through my journals, and I try to keep journals of what God has done through the years. And as I was going through one, it was 2010. I went to a church in Kentucky, and as I was there, this young man came up and he was praying for Tim, prayed for Hilo, and he prayed for me. And it was amazing, because he told Tim, because I wrote it all down, because otherwise I forget, and he told Tim, he goes, "God's going to give you boldness, and you're going to start seeing more boldness." And even though, and this boy did not even know Tim, and he was 22 years old when he prophesied to Tim, and he said, "You worry about your speech." And nobody's told this man anything about that. And he goes, "But God is going to start blessing you where you think that you can't, and you're going to start standing up and talking more, and you're going to realize that God's bringing you out a little at a time." And I wrote that down, and I was reading, and I was like, you know, he has came farther than he had been in the last, since 2010. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then, you know, he said something else to me, and at the time, you're thinking, well, maybe he was wrong. You know, have you ever had someone tell you something and you're thinking he was wrong? But he told me, he said, somebody in your family is going to be really, really bad sick. And he goes, and God wants you to know, and this is 2010, that God's going to bring them through it. And he goes, and it's going to be such a closeness to life and death. This is 2010 now. In 2013 is when I had that attack, and they didn't know if I was going to make it. You know, and I thought, you know, that was amazing, because God already knew in 2010 what was going to go in my life. And then when I was talking to the liver doctor, they said that occurred in 2009 was small, but by the 2010 is what started making me really sick, and I didn't even put two to two together. But see, if you write down what God has gave you in a journal of things that God has blessed you with or told you, then it's amazing when you go back to it, because, you know, things we forget, and things you know, the devil will make you forget things. That's good, you know, and say, man, and it's just amazing how God God's brought us through so much. And as I was thinking about all the things that God has brought us, my family, through. Not just, I could tell you stories and stories of what my mom had been through. But I can tell you stories of what God has brought me through. And my family, and what all the things that we've been through. And as I was going through them, I was thinking about, my nieces. Heather, I'm telling you what, she got a boyfriend that just did her wrong all the time. And I was like, God, you got to move him out of her life. You got to move him out of her life. That's it, God. I said, and it seemed like, it was going on and on. And I wrote that down, and I put, there has been times, no matter how much hard you pray, that God don't seem to answer. And then I put, but God is always on time. And Heather went through this relationship, and it seemed like it was almost a year. And I thought, God, what in the world, what's going on? And I would pray every day. But God finally moved him out. But, maybe other people were praying. But I know that I was praying that God move him out. And then my daughter went through so many different relationships. I said, God, you got to move them out. And so Heather brought her boyfriend over and wanted me to meet him. And she goes, this is my new boyfriend. And started introducing him. And she looks at me and then she goes, Aunt Sondra. And I said, what? She goes, don't pray him away. But, I didn't say, that I was going to pray him away. I just, every time it seemed like they got a boyfriend, I'd say, Mary, that guy just not right. I mean, there's something about him. And it's always somebody that end up hitting them or hit the girls. And Heather would get knocked around and stuff. And I was like, man, what in the world's wrong with you girls? You need to, and I said, if they ain't got enough to stand up, then I'm going to just pray them away. And God just seemed like he moved them all away. And it takes somebody saying, God, move them away. If they're not going to get in, move them out. God, if they're not going to get in, move them out. And that's what I always say, God, because everybody's got a chance. Everybody's got a chance to get in there. But it's the point that, God, if they're going to bring them out, drag them out, or whatever, and hurt them, God, just move them out of their life. And God seemed like he always answered. And it's just like, Tim, I love Tim, and everybody knows I love my son, but there was a young lady that came in his life, and I said, God, if that's not your will, you got to move her out. I said, you got to move her out. Well, God moved him out, and everybody, my daughter said, Mom, you want us to be single all our life. And I said, no, there is good people out there. There's men that'll treat you like a princess. There's men that'll treat, that don't go around hitting the women all the time and abusing them and screaming at them and mouthing them about what they do and what they don't do all the time, but has a caring heart. And they was like, man, Mom. And so, but I didn't want them to be single all their life, but there is somebody that God's going to send along for them. And my kids seem really happy now, and I thank God for them because, like I told Tim, I said, if it was God's will, then God will move him out. And you know what? He came in here to church, and I told Brother Mark about this. He came into church and he said, okay, if it's the Lord's will, she'll come to church Thursday. If not, then I'll move on. And and then it was so cute because he goes, but Mom, I want you to know I'm going to be depressed if she doesn't show up. And I have to move on. But but it was the point that God moved her on. And it was the Lord's will. But I knew because it just seemed like, you could tell when somebody is just going to hurt people over and over. And God knows. And it just makes me feel good because, Mary has met a really nice young man. He don't go to church, but he's such a nice young man. And, he don't go to church at our church. I don't know if he goes to church anywhere, but it's just the point that he is so different from anybody that she ever had. And I thank God for it. So I'm not praying him away, because she's happy. And he said, he seems like he's a really good guy. And I said, God, you're sending them one at a time. One at a time, you're sending somebody for them so they're not, always depressed and upset and wondering, is there somebody out there? And I thank God for that. And, as I went along through my life, we've had to stand up and just say, devil, you're a liar. And stand up to our children and say, I think you're okay, fine, but if God prays them, if God moves them out of your life, then you're just going to have to move on. And you know, it's just like my nieces and even my daughter said, Mom, please don't pray my men away no more. And you know, I'm like, well, okay, you get a good one, I won't pray them away. That's exactly what I said. You know, but you got to be a praying mom, and you got to be a praying dad, because one day your children are going to need you. And I thought so much about how many times that I was in the hospital and Hila was in the hospital and how Mary Kay was in the hospital, and God just brought her out through all this that we had been in. So we have testimony after testimony. And everybody has a testimony, but it's your choice to share your testimony with somebody and uplift them, or to share something that is going to be upsetting about gossip or something. You know, that's why Facebook can be bad in a way, and in a way it can be good. But if you're constantly giving somebody something uplifting or something to smile about, or just constantly getting on there and saying, I hate this person, I hate that person, or the drama, and then, you know, that doesn't help anybody. But that's why your testimony's got to help somebody. And if it's a good testimony, it's going to help somebody. It's going to uplift somebody, and it's going to encourage somebody. You know, our testimonies sometimes are as good as when you get a sermon from a minister. You get up here and you testify, you get just as blessed. You get up here and preach, and you can get just as blessed. Right. But I know God has a reason for everything that we go through. And like Brother Shannon had said, you know, you got to walk your own journey. And I was thinking about that, and Kevin, they both had said it in different ways, but you know, we do got to go our own separate way and choose the path that is best for God, not for us. And I think about that. I was thinking, you know, man, so many times I've chose the wrong path. You know, I've chose different paths, even when my mom and Dad would say, don't do this and don't do that. You just get stubborn, and you're saying, I'm going to do what I want because I'm old enough and think I'm big enough to do what I want. Come to find out they were right. Down at the end, you're just, oh well. You have to live through it. You have to ask God forgiveness. You got to just grow with whatever you went through. Just don't keep trying to fall in the same situation you're always in. And, you know, I really thank God. I really thank God for all that He has brought me through and all He's brought my family through. And as I was looking through my journal, I was thinking, you know, man, there's a lot of stuff I wrote down here. And as I was reading it, I was reading how I was praying, God, bring Kevin in. God, wake him up, shake his world up. Let him know that he needs you. And then I was like, Mark, God. And I was thinking, man, these kids need you. And Becky even went out there for a little bit, and I was like, God, bring her in. And then I got on there where Mark was in a band, and I said, God, tear that band up. Don't let him be out there in that band singing in a bar or somewhere or playing whatever he's doing, because, you know, he didn't even tell me, but one of my uncles, a friend of his, said, you know, your brother's playing in a bar. And I was like, no, he's not. And he's like, yeah, it's a little bar he's playing some music in. And I said, well, the devil's a liar. And I said, the person told me this. I guess they wanted to start some gossip. And I said, well, he's a grown man. And I said, I got to go. And I hung up. You know what I did? I hit my knees. And I said, God, it doesn't help anything if I sit there and say, oh, I can't believe he's doing that, you know, to other things, and it just caused problems. But I hit my knees and I said, God, I know that is not where he needs to be. He don't need to be out there singing to a bar or playing music when you got so much talent for him. And look where God has brought him from. I mean, to see him just walking around and praying for people. He has come so far. But you know, if he would have stayed in that life, Lord only knows what would have happened. And that's, you know, I keep praying, God, you do whatever you have to do. Because Mary's in a band now, and I already prayed it away once, and it broke up. And Mary didn't want to go back to it. And then the next thing you know, I guess it was a year later, she's back in that band. But, you know, they keep walking in it, and I was like, God, I don't understand that. And it was just like, when she kept going back to this one guy, and when she got out of my car, I said, Mary, I need to tell you something. And she said, what? And I said, you walk out of this car. And I said, I've been praying and praying that he goes, this guy just out of your life. But when you walk out of this car and you're telling me that you're not going to see him no more, but you're walking out of this car, and I said, I feel like that there's something in me that feels like you're going to see him. And I said, if you walk out of this car, then whatever happens is on you now, because I said, I've been praying and praying. And I said, and sometimes you're going to have to take responsibility. And I said, whatever happens, it's going to, you're going to have to start dealing with it, because I said, I'm done with just keep praying away, keep praying away. I said, sometimes God's going to have to let you fall all the way and just we have to back up. And I said, that hurt me more than anything. And Mary got out of the car and she turned around and she goes, Mom, I'm not going to see him. But she goes, I don't think God will let me go down further than to the bottom. And I said, Mary, you got to be careful. God will put you to the bottom to lift you up. I said, because you will keep playing and playing with God. And I said, and when you got someone keep praying and praying for you, and you keep saying, no, don't quit praying for me. I said, I will never stop praying for you, but I'm done praying about this situation and worrying about it. I said, because sometimes you worry yourself so much that you got to step back and say, that's enough. She walked out there, and late that evening, the man got stabbed. And I said, she didn't even tell me. And then a couple days later, I found out about it. He didn't get hurt. He just got stabbed, but he didn't get life-threatening or whatever. But I said, there's so many things. And I think in a way it kind of shook her world there for a little bit, because she realized, you don't play with God. You don't play with God. And these kids think sometimes that it's okay to play with God. But sometimes, I just felt like I had to tell her, I had to let you go, Mary. I'm done praying for that situation, because, I had someone prophesy to me, stop praying for the situation over and over. It's time to step back and let God, because even though they're going to fall, God's got to do something, and it's in His hands. And so when I stepped back, and then it seemed like it shook her world, and then she started getting better, and now she's no longer with that guy. And see, God sometimes knows that we just got to step back because we're trying to control the situation instead of letting God control the situation. And I was worse than that than anybody, because I like to try to control the situation, and I would try to fix everything. And you can't fix everything. That's God's job to fix everything, and God's time to do what He has to do. And when we step back and let God, man, the directions He sends us in, we're like, wow, that's amazing. And it's just like Kevin, God just brought him here, and look, he's ministering now and getting with it, and Mark, and yes, the kids have came in and they went back out, and they came in and went back out, but God knows where they're at. God sees where they're at. God knows everything about them, and I believe that they're all coming back. I believe it. I believe they're all going to come back. I believe they're going to put God first for once in their life. But God has to take them to the place that they need to be. And, no matter what we do, we just keep praying for them and believing that God's going to put them where they need to be. And I thank God for my testimony. And I thank God for all the testimonies here, because we've all been through something. And, it's just like Tim has the migraines. I had the migraines. I had them so bad that it just made me so sick all day long. I'd be sick. But God healed me from them. I had an appendix that I was hurting so bad that God healed me from that. And God's healed me from so many different things that I've got a testimony. And I know that even though, the doctors say I have cancer, and then they just said they had to up my medicine, and they was $400, and now that's $600 because that chemo pill, because they said that my cancer isn't dying anymore. Well, that's just the devil, because I believe God's healing me. I believe no matter what the devil says, God's still on the throne, and God's still healing me, because, no matter what happens or what comes, even if I go down, as long as I'm ready, God's got to take care of them, and there ain't nothing I can do with my family. I can't drag them in, and I can't put a U-Haul in the back of my vehicle and think I'm going to put all them in there and take them with me. But it's in God's hand. And so if I'm not here, it's still in God's hand. Somebody's still praying for my family. And even the prayers that was laid back is still being worked on every day, because my mom prayed every day. And I know that God is answering them prayers. So no matter what comes and what goes, and if God chooses for me to go or God chooses for me to stay longer, I know that God has the purposes for everything. Everything. And I've got to thank God, and I've got to give my testimony. And even though, sometimes they say, well, you're not getting healed. Well, yes, I am. I am getting healed, because if I am not healed in this body, body, I will be healed in that body when I get to heaven. And you know, my mom always said, Sondra, I want to walk so bad. I want to run around the church again. And she just said, I really, really feel like God's going to let me walk again and run again. And someone brought that up and said, well, she never did run again. Yes, she did. She's up in heaven running. Don't you think when she seen God that she didn't take off and run in to see Him and say, thank God, thank God, thank God, as she always did? Because I've got to believe that. I've got to believe that God is there and that no matter what, we're going to have a new body. And one day I'm going to be healed, either here or there. I'm going to be healed. But I still got to thank God. And I can't sit around and feel sorry for myself. And I just got to encourage others because God has brought me through so much. Last year I was supposed to be dead. This year I'm still standing here. So yes, God has brought me through so much. And I see where He's healed me so many times. And I have no right to sit back and feel sorry for myself and say, God's not healing me right now. I'm not completely healed. At first it'll take your breath away when someone tells you you got cancer, or they tell you that it's getting bigger, or this and that, and it hurts and it scares you. But then you take that anger and you say, God, it's yours. I've got to let it go, because no matter what goes in my life, what happens, it's yours. And it's just like when my brother Kevin, they told him that whatever is in his stomach is growing, and that just a few months ago it was a 2, now it's a 5. God's got that. At first it just, it's like, oh God, what's going on? But then you're like, and that's when Brother Shannon got up and said what he said. That just touched me, because I thought, no matter what, it's in God's hand. It's in God's hand. And I was sitting back there holding my breath, and you don't even realize you're holding your breath. And I knew Kevin was holding his breath. And then when Brother Shannon said oh man, that was such a blessing, because what you was talking about is just like, wow, no matter what happens, God has a reason for it. And he didn't have to know what was going on, but it was just the point that he let God use him through that testimony. That small sermon touched more, because then it gave me it was like I reached out and grabbed another handful of faith and said, God, you got this, you got this, you got this. So no matter what comes, God's got this. If God chooses first to go, we got to say, God, it's yours. You'll miss your family, the family will miss you. But man, you're going to be up in heaven. Who cares about it? But, they're not sitting down there saying, oh man, I wish I was there. They don't. Because when you're with God, that's the only place you want to be. And I thank God for my testimonies, and I thank God for what He's done. And that's all I have to say. But I do thank God for everything that He has touched me and blessed me and gave me. And I thank God for what He's going to do and what He has already done. Thank God.
Can we stand?